y'all? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am doing the deep dive analysis and recap of the movie Sinners. So if you paid attention yesterday, I dropped the first review, which was like my first thoughts, just really raw, like emotional, like I'm just telling you what I feel about the movie. But today I actually just left the theater to watch it for a second time because I really wanted to be able to digest it a little bit better. And I took some notes and I want to kind of go throughout the storyline and talk about it as a film analysis and kind of talk about some themes, some foreshadowing I saw, some little Easter eggs and just different things like that. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, first things first, the first thing you hear before you even see any images pop up on the screen, you hear a note being plucked on the guitar. But knowing what I know about instrumentation, I can tell that the person was actually tuning the guitar because it continued to play one note and it was bending frequency a little bit. So I can tell that they were tuning the guitar, and that felt like very eerie because you're going from a note that was not right, it was not in tune, and then it finally got in tune, and then you start the storyline where he's actually starting to pick the guitar and kind of pull that music in. And a lot of times, whenever you hear a note that's not right in real life, it kind of makes you kind of cringe a little bit because you can tell that it's not where it's supposed to be, and it kind of can bring you into this like uneasy feeling. And that's immediately what I felt when bringing into the storyline. It's like, okay, this is clearly a little bit of wickedness going on. Like, where are we at? The first thing we see is Lil Sammy going into the church. And when he opens the doors of the church, you notice that everybody is wearing all white. And my first thought was maybe it's First Sunday, because when you think about Christian churches, a lot of times on First Sunday, it is traditional to wear all white to celebrate the communion. But when I looked at the calendar for October 16th, 1932, the 16th wasn't the first Sunday. It's actually the third Sunday, but it's right in the middle of the week. So that could be symbolic as well, specifically the date. I don't really know the nuance or the description of why that date is necessarily important. So that's something I'll have to like look into. But even if it's not First Sunday, all white in a church on Sunday is pretty obvious for the symbolism of purity and sanctity. You are coming in a holy place, very much ritualistic. All of those things still come into play. And you have to think Sammy is walking into the church dirty, bloody, and he's disturbing this service. So very obvious there. One thing I want to note that did not strike Something I want to say that I did not peep until the second time was the presence of the vultures. Specifically, the first time we see the vultures is when they are hovering over the place that the two brothers purchased. It was two vultures at first, and then a third one showed up when the white man came to come and purchase, to take the money from them so that they could purchase that land. And I said, these vultures, like that has to be intentional, because of the way they were on screen and circling around. And if you know anything about vultures, what they typically do is they circle around something, specifically an animal who's about to die. And usually vultures can spot an animal that is diseased or about to die, whatever. They circle around and wait for them to die because they eat on the dead. And if you think about how both Smoke and Stack and that white man end up dead, it's kind of like they're awaiting their fate. And it's kind of like that omnipresence, like premonition, not premonition, but an omen, almost like this is going to be your ultimate fate. You also see the presence of the vultures over the house of the clan members. When Remick comes into them, you can see the two vultures hovering around the house then. And you also see the vultures hovering around the juke joint when everybody is around. So again, I definitely feel like that was very intentional of them to include those vultures specifically around a place that was going to end up with a lot of dead. Also, when Smoke and Stack are, looking at the space, they're like, yeah, we want to take it, we want to purchase it. Smoke is looking at the floors, and he notices like they're stained, and he's like, did y'all clean these floors? And he's like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, we cleaned them, knowing he fucking lying. He's like, what was it? And he didn't want to answer. And I think it was obvious that those were blood-stained floors. And of course, that's symbolism as well for clearly there's already been death here. And the fact that the blood is still stained, the fact that the blood is still there, that just can't be a good sign. So then we go back to the scene where Sammy is in the church with his dad, and he's kind of having this conversation like, you know, I've been working all week picking this goddamn cotton. I done met my quota. I did all the things that I was told to do, and now I want to seek a sense of freedom from myself, but I'll be back in the morning. I can make that promise to you. And his dad is like, I want you to help me preach tomorrow. And he told him, he guided him to a scripture. The scripture was 1 Corinthians 13. And 1 Corinthians 13 reads, if we did truly love our neighbor, we should be able to exercise patience towards all of our neighbors, just like Jesus did. And I think that's a very like prominent verse, especially considering like community is a really strong element within this entire storyline, and you'll see that kind of play out in many different ways. And it's like, you have to trust me as God trusted me. And so I thought that was an interesting verse that they plucked out. And this, of course, is also the scene where Sammy's dad looks at him and goes, all right, you keep dancing with the devil, and one day he gonna follow you home. Obviously, that was a very obvious foreshadowing of what's about to come for the main storyline. But I also think it's one of those things that we have to think about, like, why is it that our Christian ancestors, our Christian elders sometimes view worldliness with evil, and saying that, you know, you are going out here seeking this sense of freedom, you're going to bring back darkness. So on one end, yes, it was a premonition of some sort. It was a foreshadowing to the fate that he's going to succumb to. But I think it was also a challenge for Sammy to explore that and understand, like, what even does this mean for himself? Like, let me see what this nigga even talk about. So then, of course, we get to where Smoke and Stack bring Sammy along. They pick him up. They're about to go take him to kind of run these errands so they can like get everything for their juke joint. And then they go to their car. Immediately they see a snake. And if you know anything, snakes are very, very, very symbolic when it comes to traditional literature. I want to read this quote. In literature, snakes carry disease and powerful symbolism, often representing negative and positive aspects of the human condition. In the Christian tradition, the serpent and associated with the evil, temptation, and deception stemming from the story of Adam and Eve. So think about what's going to happen in this story. If the story is not about anything, it's about temptation. Because what's happening is Sammy is excited. He's finally going to be able to live out his dream playing this instrument, but he's also going to be met with temptation of adultery and greed and gluttony and all these, you know, quote unquote 7 deadly sins that we see in the Bible. The temptation is going to be all around. They're going to be exposed to all of these, what have been told to them as sins. And so obviously that was a really quick little level of foreshadowing and symbolism in that point as well. Something also I really want to note in this point right here, this is when the brothers first split up. Smoke looks at Sammy and goes, I want you to watch out for Stack. Of course, Stack is the older cousin, right? But you're telling Sammy to look out for him. I think there's two things happening. Sammy has this almost presence of security and safety around him, but also you note that Smoke says Stack don't always know when to watch his back. And I think that you can immediately see the difference between these two brothers and the way that they carry themselves. Smoke is very affirmative. He's very sharp. He's very witty. He knows how to maneuver through business. He's very aware of his surroundings and things like that, where Stack is the one who's very cunning. He has the personality and the charm and the charisma, the ability to kind of maneuver and convince people, and he has that community spirit element to him. And because he is in that way, he doesn't always know how to be hyper aware of his surroundings. And if that wasn't a big foreshadowing moment in and of itself right there, I don't know what is. But of course, that was a moment where it's just like, damn, you know your brother's weaknesses. So now it's time for one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. Smoke goes alone, right? He heads to the market. But what's really important right here is a historical element of this movie. You see, he goes into the Chinese market, and a lot of people don't recognize why there were Chinese people in this movie. It's 1930s, it's Mississippi, what the hell is going on? But what a lot of people don't know is that there is a very select group of Chinese Americans that lived in the South because of their great migration and the gold rush era and different historical elements that happened along the time. But you see, they were not black and they were not white, so they were able to kind of maneuver through these two communities in different ways. Because they weren't black and they had a little bit of closer proximity to whiteness, they were able to set up shop and have businesses and things like that that were able to cater to both the black audience and crowd the same as the white. But in the same token, they were ostracized because they were not necessarily in community with white folks either, because they were still Chinese. And one element that I want to talk about, this is a film choice that I thought was so freaking masterful, is of course Smoke is in there. He's trying to, piece together, essentially right now what they're doing, they're trying to piece together this party. They have to get everybody down there tonight to make sure this party can be a go. So he goes to Bo's shop and he's talking to him like, hey, I need a whole bunch of catfish and I need a couple signs, this bartering system and using your resources, using your community, right? And what happens is, I want y'all to notate this. What happens is Bo looks at his daughter Lisa and says, go get your mom, right? She has to walk across the street to the white market to go get her mom. One thing I want to highlight is the fact that that was an entire one take long shot. God damn it, Ryan Coogler. That was so massive. And I'm so glad he did that, because it really took you into that time period. There was this level of camaraderie and like almost easiness and a calmness when they were in the shop with Bo. And then as the camera followed Lisa to across the street, that feeling changed. It was a little uneasy. It was more sharp. It was more intense. It was more like you have to keep your head on the swivel. Like you can feel the darkness change because they're on the white side of things. So when she gets her mom, she comes across the street, her energy changes from being very stoic to being very my people, because she's way more accepted on the black side than the white side, because of course black folks know all about ostracization and marginalization. And then of course we see the conversation between her and Smoke, that negotiating tool, which he just taught the little girl outside. And I think that was kind of a nod to show the community aspect of what each group of people was getting from each other. Like I said, there was a bartering system that was also happening in there, which only can happen with community. I think it's very clear that he learned his negotiating skills from Grace. Like I said, in this part of the movie, they are trying to get all the puzzle pieces together to make sure that Club Juke goes up tonight. So while Smoke was handling all the necessities, baby, we need some fish, we need some signs, we need all the good stuff. We going over to Stack and Sammy. They go to the train station and they're going to, you can see all the little people playing music at their respectable corners, and they go to old Delta Slim, which is clearly a very known character in this time period, because Sammy knew who he was. Like he was almost like a legend, like an urban legend. Like, that's Delta Slim, right? He's clearly this popular blues musician of that time, but he's also very clearly the town drunk and alcoholic, which is probably why he has been stuck in that town, only being able to play blues music at the local juke joint every damn Monday. It's just kind of one of those things. But he also talked about this sense of familiarity, like, I don't want to go to your juke joint because what I know is home. I go to this other spot every week. You know what I'm saying? They may not pay me a lot, but they give me all I can drink, and I know they're gonna be there every week. And this is the life. This is the only life that I can accept. He feels like he doesn't really have the sense of choice. He's like, I might as well just do what I have, because a sinner like me, well, that's all I could ask for. And I think that was a moment in time, a call back to this element of how bad is too far gone. Are your sins really gonna be the thing that take you to the deep end? Are your sins enough to relinquish you from salvation? Are you completely like X'd out from this idea of righteousness because you indulge in these things, right? He had already accepted his fate as a sinner. I don't even deserve this. Of course, Stack offered him that paper and that Irish beer. He said, well, baby, you ain't said nothing but a word. And of course, then we are introduced to Miss Mary Octoroon. Miss Mary the Octoroon. And of course, there is a very clear difference with the love interest here, because we have on one end, we have Mary, who is clearly an octoroon, right? Which means her grandfather is half black. She ain't got much in her, and she is actively passing as white. Now, I'm going to put a little pin right there to give y'all a quick lesson on passing. Back in the day when passing was a thing, a lot of the times right now, passing is not really a thing anymore because of the laws of the land have changed. But in that time period, passing was an active decision that you had to make on how to live your life. She had been married off to a white man and was living as a white woman in Arkansas at the time. So her being here, being present, and acknowledging even just a little slither of blackness, going back to her old nigga who is clearly black, was putting her in danger because she wasn't even supposed to be here. She wasn't even supposed to be acknowledging her blackness. And that's why there was clearly a little bit of distance in their little area right there. Right? But like I said, there is very clearly differences between the brothers, because you can see that even within their love interest. Because like I said, Stack is very spontaneous. He's a little whimsical, right? He's a little out there. He don't watch his back a lot. But he's also risque because he's the one who's dating a little passing white girl versus going the safe route and something a little bit more standard, dating somebody who was black like Smoke did on the other end, right? Very clear as day, like, oh, okay. So we finally got Delta Slim all good to go. We get him in the truck and they headed to the juke joint. We ready to go. They got to get a couple more characters. And Delta starts telling this story about, you know, his friend that was essentially lynched for no reason, unjustly, as they had passed the prison workers, and just kind of basically showing like, damn, I could have been there just as easily, you know, just feeling like I could have ended up in any one of these, you know, scenarios. And as he's telling that story, of course, we can hear the sound effects in the background of what that must have sounded like. But right after that, I want to note that he started humming. Whatever the fuck he was humming, right? But as he's humming and tapping and they start playing, I want y'all to know that that is like the evolution of blues music. That is what blues music derives from, that pain and that sorrow. He was in such this triggered pain from telling that story about his friend being lynched. The only thing he could do was rock and hum to kind of get him up out of that element. And that is what blues music is all about. Taking the pain, the struggle, and all of that shit that you've experienced and putting it into song and releasing. Music is a very spiritual releasing element. So, yeah. So they got all the things that they need now for this juke joint to be a thing. What I want y'all to notice on screen is immediately in this moment, the aspect ratio changes to the 4:3. So it expands. So as it's expanding, this song is it's getting louder. These tunes, you can hear the chords expanding. It's very dynamic sound right here. So it's pulling you into the storyline. It almost kind of feels like this. Because we're really about to transition. And I think that was a great element to show like the transition into Act 2. Right after that, we see Remick fall out the sky. Of course, that's signifying him as a vampire. This nigga was literally falling from the sky because them niggas fly and shit. But clearly he was being hunted by the Native American / Indigenous American folks at that point in time. We don't really get a lot of information as to how the indigenous people interacted with these vampires, but I think it's very clear that they had some sort of ritual to be able to hunt them, because he was running away from them. But also you can see that the sunlight was coming up, which is why he was burning from the flesh and trying to be invited to this house. Again, this is when you see some more vultures on top of that roof, again signifying death is coming. Death is upon you. Of course, Remick goes in, snatches them people up, and is on and cracking from this point on. Then we get into, again, probably the highlight scene of the movie, everybody's favorite, this music scene where Sammy comes in and he is playing this guitar, but he is so soulful and he's so connected spiritually in this moment that as he's releasing, he is connecting and conjuring up spirits from the past, present, and future. And you can see all the cultures aligning, but it wasn't just the African American cultures. You also see the Chinese culture, you also see the Native American, you see all of these things coming in one. And I mentioned this in a TikTok. The most preserved cultures you see are from an oppressed people, because that's all but we are, is our culture. And it's important for us to preserve that in many different ways. Music is very spiritual. And when you talk to people who engage in a lot of spirituality and spiritual connection, they will talk to you all the time about how music can be used to conjure up spirits. Music can be used to heal you in different ways. There is a very, very spiritual element to playing music intentionally. And so this moment was very jarring to see in such a beautiful way. Like, it was such a beautiful scene in so many ways. So I really loved how they portrayed that. But also, it was another film element that I want to point out, another extreme long shot. Ryan Coogler was very intentional in putting these long shots in there because it really pulled you into the story and it captivates you. It almost makes you not want to blink when you're looking at these really, really long shots. And it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of choreography for that. And I'm super impressed by that. But of course, this music is what pulls Remick into the scene, because he is being conjured as well. And there's this notion that when you are conjuring up spirits during music, you are also conjuring up evil. But it's not because the music itself is evil. It's because the music itself is powerful. And I think that sometimes is lost on this element of spirituality. And even when you get into some of the super cult Christians who are anti this idea of spirituality, they think it's because this thing that you're doing is evil because it brings up these quote unquote demons. But that's not what's happening. This music is so powerful. This spirituality, this energy that you have, this connection to the spiritual realm is so powerful that you are able to bring up all of these things. And so that's what I kind of wanted. That's what I got from it, at least. And of course, the aspect ratio changes again during the dancing. That's another thing I wanted to know. What was so important historically is that Ryan chose to make the main antagonist of the film, Remick, an Irish man, right? If you know anything about white history, when I say white history, I do mean the history of what whiteness is that Irish folks and Italian folks at one point in time were not considered white, because whiteness has always been up for debate. Whiteness has always been malleable, depending on who it would benefit at the time, according to white supremacy. And they were treated as others, as colored folks, right? And so when Remick is talking to them about this, like, yeah, like they don't. I get what you're saying. He wasn't just trying to con them into coming in. He was speaking factually, and of course you'll know if you saw some of the Easter eggs that was dropped in the Spotify playlist that Remick was dropped off in America around 1911-ish, right? So he had been there for 20 years already. He had seen all of these things. He was letting them know, listen, I know exactly what you're going through, and I'm telling you now that the freedom that you're seeking, you're never going to get here on earth, right? Of course, there is a little bit of kindness in that because he really just wants them to join them in the afterlife, but on the same token, there is a bit of truth to it as well. He's not necessarily lying. There was an opportunity, a choice. He was giving them a choice, because you also have to invite those vampires in, and I think that was another great spiritual element, because when you're talking about being able to have access to these quote unquote evil demonic spirits, you also have the autonomy and the power within yourself to invite them in. And that was such a moment. He's giving you all of these things. Hey, you can come and be with us, and you can live on and live free and live forever, or you can stay in there and not understand and then at some point be a part of this world that doesn't accept you, and then maybe sometime die. So he's confronting them with very real conflicts that they're gonna have, and he's letting them know, hey, this cracker right here, they was finna come kill y'all anyway in the morning. That was always a part of the plan. I know that because I can see their memories and their things. And so he wants to absorb their memories and their culture and their ideas and their concepts, because he is trying to essentially create a new world order by having everybody be vampires. Because if you notice, once all the characters become vampires, they have this almost euphoric like sense of them. They're just like, everything's so great. They all have this weird sense of happiness and an uptone. And so it's almost, like I said, a euphoric sense of things changing because they want to pull you in, and they're able to kind of take the high points of life. And so it's definitely a point of reckoning while having Remick talk to the other characters face to face, like, listen, I know this is scary, but it could be good. And I think it's also a call to how Ryan is able to really carefully curate an antagonist, villainous character in such a way that has depth. And it's not just so flat. It's not all about being evil, because even the most evil, when you talk about the idea of Lucifer being a grace that was fallen from sky, he had a backstory. He did not wake up one day and become Lucifer. And I think that him taking the opportunity to give Remick a background story, but not only a background story that closely aligns to his protagonist and these other Black characters, it was very intentional, and it felt more authentic to the storyline, and it made it more interesting, right? There was so much power in that scene. And that's why you see Remick go off and do his Irish dance, because again, dance and music is powerful and it can be used in so many different ways. And I think that in a way, it was kind of not just them conjuring spirits in that element, but almost trying to allure them into that, kind of like in this serpent way, like, come to the light, Caroline. In that kind of way. When Remick was in there doing them damn Irish two-stepping dances, and you see all these Black people surrounding him and dancing with him, and they're all becoming one in unison, and then they all kind of crowd around him, he kind of closes his eyes and leans back. And I think that was such a representation of finally feeling this level of acceptance in community after being shut out as an Irish person with these white folks, thinking you have community, but facing the real true evil of white supremacy. But then all of a sudden, when you finally have this level of acceptance with these people that you brought into your world, like, that was everything. Of course, after that we see the big fight scenes, right? All of these characters are now having to fight it out, like, oh my gosh, and everybody hates Grace, and I get it. Like, of course, like, as just a movie watcher, you hate Grace, but you have to be empathetic to the fact that, you know, that was her choice, right? Again, I think this is all about choice and power and what you view as freedom. There are different freedoms that come about this storyline, because on one end you have Remick, who was feeling a sense of freedom from no longer having to walk this earth and not feel accepted being Irish. And then you have Annie, who said, I don't even, nigga, they bite me, end it now. I want to be free with my daughter in the afterlife with my ancestors. That was her level and her imagination of freedom, and that's what she wanted. And then you have Sammy, his idea of freedom was escaping that plantation, leaving everything he knew behind, and choosing his music, because his music was what brought him that level of freedom and acceptance. And of course, we see that Smoke made a deal with Stack that, hey, leave Sammy alone, let him live out his life. And as I'm editing this, yeah, Smoke made a deal with Stack. That's the same symbolicness of making a deal with a damn devil. And I'll let you be free in this sort of afterlife here on earth, and that'll be our deal. And of course, as soon as he took off that mojo bag, we see that, you know, he succumbed to his final fate as well, because I think at that point he lost the love of his life, he lost his child, he lost his other half, and he already guaranteed his little cousin some safety. There was nothing left for him to do but kill some crackers. Like, I think he was like, fuck it, like, I've done all that I needed to do, and he accepted his fate right then and there. Of course, there was lots of elements of spirituality when you look at Annie Annie was clearly a hoodoo priestess, and she worked in an apothecary, which was really important because when we talk about Black folks, specifically African Americans in our lineage, everybody wants to talk about Christianity, which was a huge pillar of our society, but so was these spiritual cultural practices, as Annie was doing. A lot of the times the two were married together, and I loved having her in there because she was the only person able to understand that something was wrong. You know, she was the only person able to really connect because she had that power of discernment within her, while everybody else is not necessarily aware in that moment. She has a hyper awareness because she has a connection to the spiritual world, and I think that was a very important element. She was the one of the only people in the storyline that was able to choose her fate, ultimately. Of course, you know, she talked about giving Smoke that mojo bag before he left town, and it had been keeping him safe all that time until he took it off. You know, it speaks to the power of your ancestors and things like that. There was a lot of really amazing storytelling elements in here, which you know, the script was just written really amazingly. I didn't feel like there were any plot holes or anything like that. Of course, we ended a couple years later in 1992, and here we go. We see Stack and Mary alive and well visiting Sammy, and even again offering him, you know, you gonna die soon, you know what I'm saying? We can keep you here if that's what you want. Still that idea of choice, still that opportunity to have that autonomy and power to choose your fate and what matters to you and what is freedom to you. And I think that I thought that was a really powerful ending. And then when you come to the very last end credit scene, you see Sammy playing in the church and he looks up. And I think that in that moment, I think that he was conjuring up a spirit in that moment. And I think that he was probably unintentionally opening up that can of worms. I think that actually predates all the things that we saw happening in the storyline. I think that was kind of that portal that he essentially opened up while he's singing, because he just had that gift. So yeah, that was my recap of the movie. I think that a couple of the overarching themes of the movie that you can take away is spirituality cannot be the end all be all to your life, because you always have choices and you always have autonomy. I think spirituality, whether that be with the Christian practice or with hoodoo or however you want to practice, is merely a way for you to be able to connect to your spirituality, but it cannot save you. At the end of the day, you have to make choices, and those choices are always going to have consequences, whether good or bad. I think another theme being community. Community is very important. In every sense of the word. Community is always going to be there for you. Community is going to help you make those decision choices. Talking about freedom. Freedom is something that you have to define for yourself, because that is the only way you will ever achieve this level of freedom, is if you choose it for yourself and if you design it and create it. Amazing storytelling, amazing cinematography, amazingly written, amazing acting. I truly think that this movie was a 10 out of 10. I don't have anything negative to say about it. I would love to watch it again, honestly, because it's really that good. But I would love to hear y'all's thoughts and opinions and comments below. Whatever Easter eggs, historical elements you want to add in there. I'm sure I missed some. This was just the quick notes I took. I would love to keep the conversation going, but I would also love to keep this going, doing these movie reviews and kind of get back into my element of talking about film and television, because I really do enjoy this as well. So let me know if this is something y'all want to see from me, and of course I'll give it to you. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.